want an opposition party. I think the Democrats caved. I think the Democrats let down the American people. And like you, Whoopi, I have absolutely no faith that the Republican Party will come to the negotiating table in good faith. Shame on the Democrats for even believing that the Republicans will, even vote on it.
The View's Sonny Hostin slamming the 8 senators who voted with Republicans to pass the funding bill and end the government shutdown after more than 40 days.
Notably, none of those 8 Democrats were up for re-election, leading many to think that the sudden changes of heart weren't exactly random, but perhaps coordinated by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's now taking much of the heat. Take a listen to what Sonny said next.
The Democrats went into this after a blue wave out of the American people saying, we do want the opposition. The working people want the Democratic Party to fight for them. And now they just caved and surrendered. I think Chuck Schumer, his days are over. If he cannot keep his caucus together, he needs to go.
And she's not alone. Many Democrats in Congress are also calling for a change in Senate leadership. Congressman Ro Khanna writing on X, Senator Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for? To which Graham Plattner, the popular Democratic Senate candidate from Maine, replied, Chuck Schumer is not built for this moment.
Massachusetts Representative Seth Moulton, who's also running for Senate, took a swing at Schumer on X, writing that the vote was, quote, another example of why we need new leadership. If Chuck Schumer were an effective leader, he would have united his caucus to vote no tonight and hold the line on health care. Meanwhile, party leadership seems to be standing behind Schumer. DNC Chair Ken Martin writing in a statement, quote, as this vote moves to the House, I stand with Democratic leadership as they refuse to rubber stamp the full-scale Republican assault on Americans' health care, and I am proud of the majority of Senate Democrats who opposed this vote. Schumer seems like a bad leader, though, no matter what they say, and gotta go, but is, I don't think, going to go.
I don't think so. I don't think that there are enough votes to oust him, and I'm not sure who the replacement would be. I mean, it's Bernie Sanders isn't going to finally officially become a Democrat and be elected the Senate leader, you know. I think that there are two related problems here. There is Schumer himself and the fact that he can often seem ineffective or ill-suited to this moment. I think you and I discussed several months ago when they were having, the protests about Doge, and he was outside some government department, and it was this sort of, we will win chant was just terrible. It was just very cringe-making. But in addition to Schumer himself, I mean, there's a much bigger battle going on here, I think, between a more, not even moderate, but more corporatist kind of leadership and a lot of energy that's on the grassroots, in the grassroots that's very different from that. Not only more left-wing, sometimes is, but just generally more populist, wanting a more confrontational approach with the current administration, wanting people to really punch back harder. And that's not really Schumer's style. Like he'll say, fairly combative words, but he just doesn't have a Graham Plattner or a Bernie vibe to him.
Well, we talked about this yesterday, and I certainly understand the Democratic frustration. We just came off we the Democrats came off a big win, so why cave now? On one hand,
the Democrats is a lovely phrase to hear coming out of your mouth, Robin.
If I'm putting on my Democratic hat. On the other hand, I think the Republicans would have been willing to keep the government shut down for a long time, so maybe they didn't. You don't have the cards, you don't have the hand. Right. Although Trump is kind of erratic and is not actually maybe as interested in defending some of the conservative, limited government ideas about health care and might have forced Republicans to cave. So who knows? We didn't mention this yesterday, though, the filibuster being in the background. Trump signaling that he wanted to end the government, get rid of the filibuster to end the government shutdown, which spooked a lot of Republicans who don't want to do that. The filibuster is interesting because obviously when you're in the majority, the idea of ending the filibuster sounds very appealing.
We can get into everything we want.
Right, you could pass your agenda very easily. Right. But this is very basic concern. Well, what about when this is a frightening new power to give to my enemies when if they ever retake control? And so there's kind of always that we should be wary of that and thus not do it. Trump wanted to do it, was perfectly willing to do it, is I think less of an institutionalist, less concerned about the long-term health of the Republican Party post-Trump is not, I think, his top priority.
Certainly not.
And so he was willing to kill it. And I think many Democrats, though, would be willing to get rid of it too, because similar, they're thinking, also their idea is that why should it take 60 votes to pass legislation? Right. I fully admit, even though I think the filibuster mostly serves my political interests, in that as a libertarian, I am just take a piece of legislation, I don't know what it says, I am more likely to oppose it than not without even knowing what's in it, because that just speaks to my ideology. Right. The filibuster thwarts legislation, so I support it. There are, I'm sure, some rare cases where I would have liked the legislation to go forward and the filibuster gets in its way. That's unfortunate. Those are few and far between. However, I must admit, constitutionally and procedurally, it simply makes no sense to have it. It was not prescribed by our founders that it should take 60 votes rather than 51 to pass a piece of legislation, and it certainly creates a significant amount of dysfunction.
Yeah, look, part of the whole discussion around that is Democrats don't like it in part because the nature of the Senate, 2 senators from each state, effectively gives a slightly disproportionate impact to rural states, which tend to be Republican. So there is a partisan argument there. I tend to oppose the filibuster for exactly the opposite reasons to which you support it, which is that my view basically is that a lot of voters, I think, a lot of Americans right now, sometimes get most disenchanted by the fact that often nothing seems to happen in Congress. Now, because you are generally opposed to government, you're fine with nothing happening. Yeah. My argument is if the electorate gives a mandate to a particular party, especially in a situation of unified government, then that party should have a reasonable chance of carrying out that mandate. And if the voters don't like it, they can vote Party A out and Party B in at the next election. And then Party B would have the chance to put in its manifesto promises in a better way. So that's why I don't agree with the filibuster. I think you should have the right in the majority to go forward more ambitiously.
Yeah, I understand that, and I also am wary of the consequences of the legislature being rendered so ineffective and doing so little legislating, is that more legislating is done by courts, by the president himself, and by, worst of all for me, just bureaucrats who are not elected at all and are not subject to the same level of scrutiny as the courts and the president, and are often making decisions that I think are very bad and that are effective rulemaking that should be done by Congress that isn't done because Congress doesn't have a job anymore.
Right, and it's been done by people who no one voted for.
Right. Coming up, speaking of the Supreme Court, they have refused to revisit the ruling on same-sex marriage. More on that decision next.